Menzies in his own words. This is something we've been wanting to do for a long time. David Furse-Roberts, who we'll introduce in a moment, has been working on this for a long time. It is the essential Robert Menzies boiled down into one volume in convenient form. It is essential for speechwriters on our side of politics, arranged in topic. Very well done. Congratulations, David. But we have great pleasure today, great privilege to say a few words. The lady who wrote a magnificent foreword to this book, the person who in this room knew more of Menzies than any of us put together or ever any of us will know, and that's Robert Menzies' daughter, Heather Henderson. Heather, welcome.
This is really terrifying because this morning I reread what I'd written in David's book and I thought, I can't add anything to that. But it made me think of various things, such as being in the car with my father and my mother, going to some big event, and Dad had to make a speech, and he said, "Oh, I don't know what I'm going to say tonight. I don't know what I'm going to say tonight." So Mum and I sat there frantically thinking of things and suggesting things and went on, and we got there, and he stood up and of course made a superb, perfect, brilliant speech. And afterwards we said, why did we waste our time suggesting things? And he said, but no, you did suggest something. When you said A, that made me think of B, and that made me think of that. So you gave me the original idea, and I've followed. So I thought this morning, maybe that'll happen to me. So needless to say, it didn't. But David, I've got to say, you have the most extraordinary brain, but also tenacity and capacity for work. I'm bewildered when I think if he had the time to go through presumably hundreds of Menzies speeches, pick out all the quotes, and then place them in the right context afterwards. I mean, that to me sounds so daunting I wouldn't even try. So I admire you tremendously. I think you've done a wonderful job. It's really good. And it's quite useful actually to be able to think, I can remember my father saying something about that. I must look it up, and there it'll be there. I know it is there. So thank you very much for your huge contribution to the memory of Menzies. But he did have an extraordinary capacity for think of the right thing to say on any occasion. And he knew how to hold an audience. He knew how to get their attention in the first place, frequently by making a light-hearted remark. And they were never just jokes that he got out of a joke book. They were always original and appropriate to the occasion. And his public meetings were wonderful. They really were such fun because he was never completely at ease until the first person yelled out, "Oh, hey, Bob, what about so-and-so?" And then you could almost see him relax, and he would answer it, and the whole place would be in uproar and start laughing. And that got their attention. And having got their attention, I can tell you he did not lose it. I've heard him speak for an hour at a public meeting, and everyone listened the whole time. And the only thing that bamboozled him were the women interjectors, because because their voices were higher, he couldn't quite get what they were saying. So he had to distract it a little bit. So he worked out a system where he commented on their clothes. and actually, I think I've said this before, but somebody told me that when he was a boy, his father used to take him to my father's meetings, and they would take their sandwiches at 6 o'clock and sit in the front row. And he said one night your father was speaking and there was a woman yelling out, and he kept referring to her as the lady in the red hat, so everyone started taking notice of the red hat. And she went on and on and on and on, and he said, "Yes, madam, of course. It's through the door down there on the right." You can imagine how much that boy must have loved it. But Athol Townley was a Member of Parliament in Tasmania. And during the Depression, he was a chemist, and he never fussed about being paid. So he was extremely popular because people knew if they couldn't afford something, he would say, "That's all right, leave it." And so he had a huge following of unlikely people, like some of the wharfies and so on. And any time he spoke at a meeting, there would be some of these heavies standing around, and slightest yell from anyone in the audience, they'd feel a hand on the shoulder, and there was complete silence. So he knew how to cope with that very well indeed. My father didn't have that advantage, but he knew what to say to get attention and give unwanted attention to the interjector. But you could see him going to a meeting and never relaxing until somebody yelled out. It was his comfort. But it goes back to Jim Cope, who was a Labor Member of Parliament. Well, you probably might remember about him. He ended up as Speaker. And when Dad got the thistle, Jim yelled out and said, "Should have got an Oscar, not a thistle." And of course it's true, Dad had great thespian qualities and he could put it across. Anyway, shut up, Heather. As my brother Ian used to say, stand up so you can be seen, speak up so you can be heard, and shut up so you can be appreciated. I forgot to launch the book, sorry.
Well, Heather, thank you so much for your generous words and for that wonderful introduction. Unlike you, my recollections of Menzies are only second-hand, but so as you know, second-hand is never as good as brand new, and second-hand is not as good as first. Of knowing Heather as a living link to Sir Robert, I count Heather as a friend, and knowing her has been one of the great joys of my life, and I am indebted to her for her kindness and generosity, not least in the editing of this book. And I'm sure you will all agree she is a national treasure and a faithful torchbearer of her father's legacy. Well, this book, of course, is Menzies in his own words. And like great leaders from Abraham Lincoln to Winston Churchill and John F. Kennedy, he is eminently quotable. Both his quotations and the broader ideals he voiced boast a timeless quality. Although it's now more than half a century since he left the public stage, his ideals have never been more relevant. His liberal values, belief in individual dignity, and affirmation of our common humanity provide the perfect antidote to the contemporary challenges of identity politics on the one hand and selfish materialism on the other. For Menzies, a person's primary worth was not found in their race, class or sexuality, but in their innate God-given dignity. Rejecting the politics of sectionalism, the purpose of government for Menzies was never to be beholden to special interests, but to serve the common good of all citizens. Presiding over Australia's post-war economic growth, Menzies appreciated the blessings of riches, but reminded his people that there were even higher ideals for us to seek. So in 1962 he said, "We could easily become man for man, woman for woman, the richest country in the Southern Hemisphere, but it won't matter very much unless we can say that we are the most civilised country. Civilised because we understand the unselfish duties of citizenship. Civilised because we have come to understand the importance of the human being, the dignity of a human being, the dignity of labour, the responsibilities of riches. These are the tests of civilisation, and our great task is to produce a civilised nation." On a personal level, Menzies possessed a kindly civility and rare grace that transcended the political divide. As Prime Minister, he used to attend AFL matches with his opposite number, Arthur Calwell. And when his old political adversary, Prime Minister John Curtin, died in 1945, he had this to say: "John Curtin was my friend. He was a strenuous fighter for what he believed to be right, but he was a fair fighter. He possessed a rare political judgment, a noble sense of devotion to the national cause, and a kindliness of nature which made their impact upon the public mind and conscience, and at the end have left Australia in his lasting debt." Ladies and gentlemen, you will find these quotes and many more in this book that provides us with fragments of this man's true greatness. Thank you very much.